Be a song of invitation.
You would take a Bible in hand and open to the Old Testament book of Ruth. The Old Testament book of Ruth. We are continuing our trek through the Old Testament. Last Sunday evening we completed the book of Judges. So since I've been here, we've looked at Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, and tonight Ruth. And Lord willing, at our next study, we will begin 1st and 2nd Samuel. Well, 1st Samuel is what we'll do. And so I'm looking forward to that study with you. Now, as is our normal practice when we start a new Bible book study, what we'll want to do is look at the author of the book. We usually look at the date, we look at the occasion of writing, and then we get right into it. As far as the author of the book of Ruth goes, it is next to impossible to determine who wrote the book. Some say Samuel wrote it. I don't know. There's nothing in here that gives any hints other than the time frame, which would be about 1050 BC. And if you look at chapter 1, beginning there at verse 1, we find a date and an occasion of the writing. So at chapter 1 and verse 1 of the book of Ruth, it says, "And it came to pass in the days when the judges judged, that there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons." So this is the occasion of this short epistle, is that there was a famine during the days of the judges. Now, when was there a famine during the days of the judges? You and I just finished a study of the book of Judges. Well, the best I can tell is that if you look at Judges chapter 6, during the days of Gideon, the Midianites came up against Israel like the sand upon the seashore, and they gobbled up all the food and wouldn't let Israel have any food. And so that's the closest to a famine that I could see from the book of Judges. Now, we continue then, and we're going to do some reading tonight. Follow along in your Bible with me as we read. And I guess if you took a step aside and say, well, how could you summarize the book of Ruth in a real quick manner? Well, I would say that it's a book that has a lot of lessons, as we shall see, but I think that maybe the one really big thing that stands out is Ruth's character sketch. And if you're a woman, or a young woman, or a woman period, I think that this book really speaks to you, so to say. And of course, men as well, because we can see in Boaz what a good and quality, noble character that this man was, but there's a lot about the character of Ruth which the book has as its name. And so we're going to see that Ruth is identified as a worthy woman. And so we're going to see what a worthy woman is by studying the book of Ruth. So let's start there at verse 2. So there's a famine, and this man leaves Israel because of this famine. And in verse 2 of chapter 1, and the name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife, Naomi, and the name of his 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they came into the country of Moab, and continued there. And Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And they took to them wives of the women of Moab. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. And Mahlon and Chilion died, both of them. And the women were left of her 2 children and her husband. So, when we get through the first 5 verses, you say, well, there's a series of unfortunate events for this woman, Naomi. Her husband dies. First, they go through a terrible famine. They leave their homeland. She loses her husband to death, loses her 2 sons. And all she has left is her 2 daughter-in-laws. Verse 6, she arose with her daughter-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab how that Jehovah had visited his people in giving them bread. And she went forth out of the place where she was, her two daughter-in-laws with her, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-laws, Go, return each of you to your mother's house. Jehovah be kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. Jehovah grant you that you may find rest, each of you, in the house of her husband. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said unto her, Nay, but we will return with you unto your people. And Naomi said, Turn again, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb? That they may be your husbands? Turn again, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say, I have hope, if I should even have a husband tonight, and should also bear sons, would you tarry till they were grown? Would you therefore stay from having husbands? Nay, my daughters, for it grieves me much for your sake, for the hand of Jehovah is gone forth against me. I want you to kind of bookmark that statement in your mind as we go along here. Is it the case, I'll pose the question now, is it the case that it might be that sometimes in our lives we may misinterpret the providence of God in our lives? And that is a valid question as we go through the study. But Naomi believes that God is against her. And they lifted up their voices, verse 14, and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clave to her. Now, I looked that word up in the Septuagint, and that literally means to follow as a disciple. And that speaks volumes to the characteristics or character trait of Ruth. Ruth is a Moabite. And if you look at the next verse, verse 15, it says, And she said, Behold, your sister-in-law has gone back unto her people and unto her God. Well, if you look into the Moabites, you know that in the book of Numbers, we found that they were known as the people of Chemosh. Chemosh was a god of war and conquering. And the people would worship Chemosh, especially during times of war, and they would make human sacrifices to Chemosh at times of war. And so that's Ruth's background. But because she clave to Naomi, the word suggests that as Naomi has been with her, she, along with her husband, has taught her about Jehovah God. And she has made the conscientious decision to leave her people, to leave her God, little g God, and to follow Naomi back to Jerusalem, back to the people of God who worship Jehovah God. So again, that's a very important part of the study. Now, we continue, and we read at verse 16, And Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave you, and to return and follow after you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. And your people shall be my people, and your God my God. And where you die will I die, and there will I be buried. Jehovah do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part between me and you. And when she saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, she left all speaking unto her. So Ruth's quite a bit different than Orpah, her other sister-in-law. And so she is determined to go with Naomi. And it just reminded me of the John 6 passage there, verse 60 through 68. Remember, Jesus gave his disciples the same choice. You can go away. I'm not changing the truth. This is what God is. This is what his truth is. And they said, To whom shall we go? You have the words of life. There is nowhere else to go. We're going with you. We're following you. And really, Ruth has made the same decision. She's going to follow the Lord. She's going to follow Naomi back to the land of God. So we pick up at verse 19, And so they two went until they came to Bethlehem. And it came to pass, when they were come to Bethlehem, that all the city was moved about them. And the women said, Is this Naomi? And she said unto them, Call me no longer Naomi, call me Mara. That means bitter. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and Jehovah has brought me home again empty. Why do you call me Naomi, seeing that Jehovah has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? And so again, as I said, bookmark that where she says that God has gone against her. And here again, she's making some very clear statements regarding her assessment of what's going on. I want to bring something up here just for a moment. Is it the case? I posed this question in a class one time. I was in a gospel meeting. And I said, is it the case that when something goes wrong in your life that you should be asking questions as to why that's going on? And a brother raised his hand in the back and said, absolutely not. You just accept what goes on. And I said, now wait a minute. Let's think about what's going on here. Something terrible has happened in your life. Shouldn't you be asking the question as to why that happened? And I want you to see that is a biblical principle. And I have my Bible bookmarked in the book of Haggai, and I want to read something to you. The problem that God had with the people during the days of Haggai the prophet was that they were not considering why it was that they were going through a drought. It was a furthest thing from their mind that they're going through all these hardships. And instead of saying, is there something that I've done that's brought this hardship upon me? Instead of saying that, they just kept going on. So I just want to read this to you. In Haggai chapter 1 and verse 3, the prophet of God says, Then came the word of Jehovah by Haggai the prophet, saying, Is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your sealed houses while this house lies waste? During the days of Zerubbabel, he had all this money collected to rebuild the temple of God that had been destroyed by the Babylonians. And they took all the money that was collected for the temple and they built their own houses with it. That should cause everybody to cringe. Now, in verse 5, I'm looking at Haggai chapter 1 and verse 5. Now, therefore, thus saith Jehovah of hosts, consider your ways. I want you to think about what you have done. You've taken this money dedicated to rebuild the house of God, and you've used it to build your own houses. And there are some consequences. You're going through some hard times right now, and you're not even considering the cause of it. It might be that you're going through a hard time right now because of your poor choices. And I know that's difficult to say, but we've all been there. Shouldn't you at least consider it? You have sown much and bring in little, verse 6. You eat, but have not enough. You drink, but you are not filled with drink. You clothe, but there's no clothes to warm you. And he that earns wages earns it and puts it into his pocket with holes. Thus saith Jehovah of hosts, consider your ways. You need to think about what's going on here. Why is it that you can't make a living? Why is it that nothing's going? You don't have enough to fill your stomach. What's going on with your life? Go up to the mountain and bring wood and build a house, and I will take pleasure in it, and I will be glorified, said Jehovah. You looked for much, and lo, it came to little. And when you brought it home, I did blow upon it. Why, saith Jehovah of hosts? Because my house lays waste, while you run every man to his own house. Therefore, for your sake the heavens withhold the dew, and the earth withholds its rain. And I called for a drought upon the land, and upon the mountains, and upon the grain. That's why we're going through a terrible drought, because you're living ungodly. But you haven't even considered. You see, now we go back to Ruth, and Ruth is considering. She's saying to herself, there are terrible things that have happened to me in my life. I'm out of favor with God. Now, this is what has to take place. What happened with Job? Does the story of Job remotely remind you of the story of Ruth? Ruth has lost everything. In fact, as you keep reading, she had to sell her land. She's poverty-stricken. She's lost it all. She's lost all her property. She's lost all her children. She's lost her husband. So you have the woman version of Job. Hopefully we can see how emotional this is. Well, in the case of Job, we are introduced to him. It says that he was a perfect man. He didn't do anything wrong. So what is going on? Why is he suffering? It might be something terrible has happened in your life at some point. And you're thinking about it in your mind right now. I remember years ago when this happened, and it was a terrible event. It was life-transforming, in fact. Well, why did that happen? Was it the case? Could it possibly be the case that you did something wrong and God was trying to get your attention? Or could it have been the case that God was testing you, like the Apostle Peter tells us in 1 Peter chapter 1? And that's exactly what the conclusion of Job was. In Job chapter 23 and verse 10, he said, Jehovah knows the way that I take. And when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. He understood. He acknowledged what was transpiring. He didn't do anything wrong. He was just going through a test. And here's what happens in tests. And this is what happens with Naomi, and this is what happens with all of us. Here's how it goes. Something terrible in your life happens. You didn't do anything wrong. It just happened. So how did you respond to it? How did you respond to that horrible thing that happened to you? Did you get upset? Did you lash out at somebody? Did the poor qualities of your character come out to rise to the surface and God put it right before your eyes so that you could see it? That's what happened, wasn't it? And you said to yourself, I don't like the way I'm acting right now. I see some very poor quality characteristics in my life. And you see, you changed. And by the providence of God, you became a better man or better woman. All because of what you suffered. That's how it works. Naomi's got this a bit wrong here, but she's going to learn, just like we all learn. Now, we move on over to chapter 2, and we read there verse 1. And Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of valor, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabite said unto Naomi, Let me now go into the field and glean among the ears of grain. After him, whom shall I find favor? And Naomi says, Go, my daughter. Did you catch that? She's going to go in the field and glean. You know what that means? That means that Naomi and Ruth are absolutely poverty-stricken. That's who goes to the field to glean. They're getting the corners. That's the law of Moses. Let the poor people have that. But I want you to notice something else, by the way, that God is always mindful of poor people. But he doesn't ever have in these texts, these sections where we just give them everything. They have to go work for it. This is provided for you. You don't have property. You don't have this. You don't have that. You're going to go work for this. This is free to you. But you got to go get it. Boy, your mind's probably exploding, isn't that? That's the whole lesson of the gleaning, isn't it? The issue of how our salvation works. It's God's gift to you. Now go get it. The field is out there for the harvest. You've got to go harvest it. But we move on here. And so she goes out and gleans. And well, lo and behold, by happen chance, you may say happen chance, or maybe better said, as we'll see, by the providence of God, she winds up in the field of Boaz. Now, Ruth doesn't know who Boaz is. She doesn't know that he's a near kinsman. She just goes out, she's just doing what she does. She's a hard worker. So, at verse 6 it says, and the servants that were, Boaz sees her gleaning his fields, and he asks her, who is this young girl? And as we read through here in chapter 2, Boaz has obviously got his eye on her. She has drawn the attention of him. And part of the reason that she drew the attention of him was because of her work ethic. And said, who is this? And they said, well, it's the Moabite damsel that came back from Naomi out of the country of Moab. Well, now Boaz knows it. Boaz is a near kinsman to Naomi, whose husband's died. And Boaz knows that he has the responsibility to fulfill the right of kinsman to his relative there, Naomi. And Boaz is watching her. It says, verse 7, that Ruth continued from the morning even until the evening, saying that she tarried a little while in the house. So she is working. She is going hard at this. And Boaz shows her some favor. Verse 10 says, when Boaz did that, she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said to him, why have I found favor in your sight? Verse 11, and Boaz says, it's been fully shown to me all that you have done to your mother-in-law, since the death of your husband, and how that you have left your father and your mother and land your nativity, and you are come to a people that you knew not who they were. And Jehovah has recompensed your work, and full rewards being given to you from Jehovah, the God of Israel, under whose wings you are come now to take refuge. Boaz said, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make you like one of my own damsels. One of my own maidens is really the word that's used. And in verse 14, at mealtime, Boaz tells Ruth, he says, come and eat of the bread and dip your morsel in vinegar. Come with all of my maidens, those that belong to me and those that are out there in my fields harvesting. I want you to come with my maidens. In verse 17, and so she gleaned in the field until evening, and she beat out that which she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. I looked that up. That's like 60 pounds of grain. And so she takes that 60 pounds of grain back to Naomi, and Naomi is shocked. Where in the world are you gleaning fields at? This is a pretty good deal here. Well, she didn't. Boaz helped her out a whole lot. Verse 19, her mother-in-law said to her, where have you gleaned this day? And Ruth says, the man with whom I wrought today is Boaz. Ruth doesn't have a clue who Boaz is. But when Naomi hears that, look how she responds, verse 20. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of Jehovah, who has not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said to her, the man is near kinsman. And Ruth the Moabite said, yea, he said to me, you shall keep fast by my young men until they have ended in my harvest. And now things are providentially falling in place. This marriage, I'm sure you're familiar with the book of Ruth, and you understand that they eventually get married, but this marriage is happening by the hands of God. There's a lot of providence going on here. And there's a lot of terrible things that have happened to get things to where they are right now, but isn't that the way it goes in life? You're going to have to go through a lot of terrible things to get to the good things. And I'm going to say this, that as far as marriage goes, Casey and I have talked about this so many times. When we were first married, things were nothing like they are right now. Right now, I have my absolute best friend that is like my right arm, can't do without her. And our love is so much different than it was when we were brand new. And so the point is that we went through a lot of ups and a lot of way down, deep downs. Way down in there, deep downs. And we came up from those very deep valleys. And then we found ourselves sometimes going back in. I mean, if you said, John, graph out your marriage life, here's what it would be like to me. Here's the start. And as years have gone, it kind of started smoothing out a little bit. The point is, you got to go through those things. That's why people that get divorces, they were unwilling to go through all that stuff. Yeah, there's terrible, terrible things to happen. But through time, people learn. John learned to stop saying stupid things, for lack of a better way of putting it. And so you learn so much. And so we get back to our text, though, and so Naomi says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to wash yourself all up. I want you to pretty yourself all up. And I want you to go to Boaz tonight, and I want you to lay at his feet. This is interesting. And so we read through the text of chapter 3, and Ruth follows the instructions of her mother-in-law, and she bathes herself, puts on some fresh clothes, and she goes to Boaz, and he's asleep at this point, middle of the night, and she just curls up and lays right at his feet. In the middle of the night, he wakes up, and she scares him to death. I know, what are you doing? Who is this? And she says, it's me, Ruth. She says, it's an interesting thing. She says in verse 9 there, I am Ruth, your handmaid. Spread therefore your skirt over your handmaid, for you are a near kinsman to me. And I looked up that phrase, spread out your skirt over me. And that's the idea of become my husband and protect me. Be my man. There's nothing sensual or odd about it. It was a way that they put that in, from the idea of an eagle's wings covering over her young to protect. And in verse 11 we have Boaz's response. He says, I will do this thing. In verse 11 he says, and now my daughter, fear not, I will do to you all that you say. For all the city of my people does know that you are a worthy woman. You know what? You've come into my life. And I caught an eye on you. And I just can't help it. I know, I say things like this. And I know that there's some of you in the audience who've lost your spouse. And I'm not trying to conjure up old memories that just get your heart pumping hard, but we do. We all remember. I still remember the very moment I laid eyes on Casey. It was at the Southside Church in Pasadena. Who is that? And that's all she wrote. But Boaz had his eye on her, didn't he? And so here's what he says. He says, this is what we're going to do. He says, it is true that I'm a near kinsman. Howbeit there is a nearer kinsman than me. We got a problem here. I really like you, Ruth, and I want this to go down. But the problem is that there's somebody in line before me. He says, tarry this night, and it shall be in the morning that if he will perform unto you the part of the kinsman, well, let him do the kinsman's part. That's law. I can't do anything about that. But if he will not do the part of the kinsman unto you, then will I do the part of the kinsman unto you. As Jehovah lives, so lie down until the morning. And she laid at his feet until the morning, and she rose up before anyone could discern another. For he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. They're thinking of reputation and so forth. Now, we get to chapter 4, and Boaz goes to the city gate. He meets this man that's a nearer kinsman than he is, and he puts before him the deal. Naomi has a piece of property, and she has sold that, and I'm asking if you would like to perform the duty of the near kinsman and to repurchase that land for her. The man says, yes, I will perform the duty of the kinsman. Well, as I read through this, I think to myself, Boaz says, well, I've got a problem now. Because I want Ruth. And so he says, well, here's the deal. If you do the duty of a kinsman, Ruth comes with this. If she is a Moabite that came back with Naomi, and her husband died as well. And you will have to raise up seed for Naomi, because Naomi's too old. So you're going to have to take her daughter-in-law, whose husband has died, and raise up seed for him. And that son that you raise, that property will belong to him. Well, the man hears that and he says, deal's off. I don't want to do that. I'll buy this property and I won't have any benefit at all. It's going to go to the kid. And so Boaz says, I'll do it. I'll take her. And I want to read to you the very last few verses of the chapter, verse 13, looking at chapter 4 and verse 13. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went in unto her, and Jehovah gave conception, and she bare a son. And the woman said unto Naomi, Blessed be Jehovah, who has not left you this day without a near kinsman. And let his name be famous in Israel. Now, as I read through this, you think about, this is going to be a prophecy of Christ, and that's what you should be thinking as we're reading through this, Christ. And he shall be unto you a restorer of life, and a nourisher of your old age. And your daughter-in-law, who loves you, you may want to highlight that. Your daughter-in-law loves you, Naomi. That's Ruth. And they said, she's better to you than 7 sons. And she has borne him for you. And Naomi took the child and laid it in her bosom and became nurse unto it. And the woman, her neighbors, gave it a name, saying, There is a son born to Naomi. And they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Abinadab. And Abinadab begot Nahshon. And Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. And Boaz begot Obed. And Obed begot Jesse. And Jesse begot David. And the book ends. So I have a couple of application things that just put a smile on my face, and I just really enjoyed the study. To me, the book of Ruth is kind of a feel-good story, and it brings out some good things that's as far as application for all of us today. But the very first thing is the issue of providence. And I would say as I read through this, and I study the subject of God's providence throughout the Word of God, I would say this, that you and I need to be very careful with our assessments of things. Careful not to ascribe something terrible to God when God's working in your life for a various cause. Do you believe that Jehovah is God? the almighty living creator of heavens and the earth. I know you do. You wouldn't be here this evening if it were not the case. Do you not realize that he still works today in these providential ways? Why did I come to Orange, Texas? I would never in a lifetime ever thought that I was going to wind up in Orange, Texas. And so sometimes when I'm praying to God, I think to myself, there are reasons, there are causes that I'm here. And you would have never in your lifetime would ever thought that a guy like John Robertson's going to come here. Boy, this guy's goofy. How did he ever wind up here? But the point is that I'm just using myself as an example, that there's a lot of things that go on in your life. Things that you don't talk to me about. Things that you don't talk to a lot of other people about, but about God. All I'm saying is be careful of the assessments. And praise God for all things that do happen. The second application issue is the issue of the lineage of Christ. We go over to Matthew chapter 1, beginning there at verse 1, and we read the genealogies of Christ. In fact, I was doing a little bit of prepping for the 1st and 2nd Samuel study, and the study of 1st and 2nd Samuel is going to be a whole lot like studying the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Because what we have when we're studying through 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, is that there are additional books testifying to things that occurred in those 4 books, and those 2 books are the books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. So when you're studying a book like Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, you're wanting to pay careful attention to what the other writers are saying about the same event to get the complete picture. And so it is the case with the book of 1st and 2nd Chronicles dealing with Samuel and the Kings. But 1st and 2nd Chronicles begins, it goes on 10, 12 chapters of genealogy. Do you think genealogies are important to God? Absolutely. You read, starting there at Matthew chapter 1 and verse 1, these are the genealogies of Jesus Christ. And so what happens? You read through there, and then you come to a passage like Romans chapter 9, and you see that the Apostle Paul says, they are not all of Israel that are of Israel. Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. You know that there is not only a lineage of Christ, but there's also a lineage of Esau and those that were not people of God. Well, what should we get out of genealogies? We should get everything out of genealogies. I want to find myself in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. That's the point of all these genealogies. It shows a separation of 2 different types of people. One people are holy, and they follow God with all their heart, mind, and soul. The others are ungodly. There is no other type of people. Genealogies, genealogies bring that out. And the third and final application issue is the issue of the worthy woman. And as I study through the book of Ruth, I find that Ruth is someone who displayed the spirit of love and care for her elderly mother-in-law. She took care of her very poverty-stricken mother-in-law. And I also see that the text says that she was very kind. And then another thing that I see about Ruth, as we're reading through here, is that she was a worker. She worked hard. Morning till evening, she's working. Now there's another place in the Bible, it's Proverbs chapter 31, that reveals a worthy woman. You read with me in Ruth chapter 3 that Boaz said, I will perform this because all the city knows that you are a worthy woman. So this phrase is something that Bible people were very familiar with. And we want to familiarize ourselves with the idea of what a worthy woman truly is. I don't want the world or the denominational Church of Christ to teach me what a worthy woman is, what God expects His woman out of women in this world. So I read the book of Ruth and I see the worthy woman. And I read Proverbs chapter 31 and I see a worthy woman that's beautiful from every aspect. And I want to read to you a couple of passages here and then the sermon will be over. I'm looking at Proverbs chapter 31 starting there at verse 10. A worthy woman who can find? Her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and she shall have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. She is like a merchant ship. She brings her bread from afar. She rises also while it is yet night and gives food to her household and their task to her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands she plants a vineyard. I'm going to pause here, and all I want to do is make a comment. This is an industrious woman. This is not a woman sitting in the house twiddling her thumbs. This woman is a hard worker. She girds her loins with strength and makes strong her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp goes not out by night. She lays her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She stretches out her hands to the poor. Yea, she reaches forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the stove for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She makes for herself carpets of tapestry. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. That's an interesting thought there. You know who he's known for? He's known because of his wife. That's something, isn't it? His wife says a lot about who he is. You know who you're going to attract. Think about that. We're going to pause here. I want to get back to reading in just a moment. But here's how you're going to either attract flies, or you're going to attract someone of a wonderful character like you. If it is the case that all you can see is physical things, and you are concerned about being beautiful and attracting the eye of some man with sheer beauty, and that's it, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a fleshly-minded guy that doesn't care about anything but the flesh. But if you are a kind woman, if you are a caring person that extends the hand of need to those who are poor, who are less fortunate than you are, in other words, you're a woman of nobility and character, and you work hard, you see, you're going to attract the same type of person that's kind, that's loving, that works hard. But that's not it. We're going to see a couple more things here in just a few verses. So, it says that her husband is known in the gates. Looking at verse 24. She makes linen garments and sells them, and delivers girdles unto the merchants. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. There's another wonderful characteristic. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the law of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household, and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children, here are the consequences. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her, saying, many daughters have done worthily, but you excel them all. Grace is deceitful, and beauty is vain. But a woman that fears God, she shall be praised. That's beautiful, isn't it? That's the woman I want. That's the woman I got. I know you guys got yourselves one too. Whoa, what a wonderful study. I really, really enjoyed that. We're going to offer an invitation this evening. We have not talked tonight about what one must do to become a Christian, but we don't want to leave that off as far as invitations go. We give you an opportunity this evening. As you look at this life of Ruth, you see how things got really bad for them. Things got really well for them real quick too, didn't it? That's the blessings of being a Christian. I've oftentimes thought about that movie, that It's a Wonderful Life. What better title for the life of a Christian? It's a Wonderful Life. Depends on your outlook, doesn't it? You say, well, things didn't go so well for you, John, over here, over there, wherever. Well, I know where I'm at right now in my mind, and that's what matters, my fellowship with God. It's a wonderful life being a Christian. You can become a Christian if you're not one this evening. You can come before this audience this evening of Christians. You can profess your faith in Jesus Christ, that He is the Christ, the Son of the living God, and you can be buried in Christ for the forgiveness of your sins and be added to the Lord's church and be identified as a Christian. You can live your wonderful life as well. That doesn't mean things are going to always be easy. Things are going to be hard. You got God on your side now. With God on your side, as the Apostle Paul says in Romans 8, God's on our side. Who can be against us? Nobody can. Nothing can. I pray God you come together and sing the same song.
Bring Christ your broken life, so Lord thy sin, He will create anew, make whole again.